"Sir, your boy, he's asleep but won't wake up. Someone hurt him, please, come quick." Michael's grip on the phone tightened. "Who are you? Where is my son? Why do you have his phone?" The girl's words tumbled out between sobs. "I don't know. He was playing. And they gave him something. He just fell. I found his phone. It said, 'Dad. Please, please come before.'" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're coming back." And then the line went dead. Michael stood frozen, the hiss of static echoing in his ear. "Sir," one of the executives ventured. "Should we cancel the rest of the meeting?" Michael snapped, shoving the phone into his pocket. "But Mr. Grant, this deal, my son is in danger." His voice brooked no argument. He stormed from the room, coat in hand, his pulse hammering in his throat. By the time his car screeched to the park entrance, night was folding over Manhattan. Families gathered up their things, laughter and chatter fading into the shadows. Michael sprinted past them, calling out, "Ethan!" His voice cut through the dark. "Ethan!" No answer. Then movement by the fountain hedge. Michael ran toward it and dropped to his knees at the sight. A little girl, no more than 6, clutched Ethan's limp body in her arms. His face was pale, lips slack. The girl's dress was faded, her shoes mismatched. But her eyes shone with determination through her tears. "You came," she whispered. "I tried to hide him. They were here. I thought they'd take him." Michael's hands shook as he touched his son's face. "Ethan, it's Daddy. Wake up." Relief jolted through him as he found a faint pulse. The girl pointed at the phone on the ground. "I found it. It said, 'Dad. I thought you'd come.'" Before Michael could answer, heavy footsteps approached. 2 men emerged from the shadows, their dark jackets and hooded faces unmistakable. Michael rose, clutching Ethan close. The girl grabbed his sleeve, trembling. The men didn't pause to listen, didn't bother with threats. One lunged forward and drove a fist into Michael's ribs. The blow knocked the air from him, pain blooming sharp and hot. He staggered back, struggling to keep hold of Ethan. The second man swung, his knuckles crashing against Michael's jaw. Stars burst across his vision, and he dropped to one knee, teeth rattling. The girl screamed. Michael forced himself upright, one arm tightening around Ethan, the other bracing against the hedge. The men closed in, and this time one of them pulled something from his pocket, a glint of steel flashing under the park lights. A knife. Michael's heart thudded. His body was failing him, but his instinct screamed to shield the children no matter what. He shifted his stance, ready to take the strike. Then sirens wailed, piercing the night. Red and blue lights washed over the fountain as police cruisers skidded to a stop. The men froze, exchanged a glance, and bolted into the darkness. "Sir, what happened here?" a police officer shouted. Rushing forward, Michael's chest heaved, his jaw throbbing where the punch had landed. He held Ethan close, shielding the little girl with his body. Another officer's eyes narrowed at the sight of the girl. "Who's she? Did she have something to do with this?" The girl's face twisted with fear, tears streaking down her dirt-smudged cheeks. She clung tighter to Michael's coat. Michael's fury erupted. His voice was ragged but iron-strong. "She's a child. She saved my son. Don't you dare treat her like a suspect." If that moment moved you, take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you felt when Michael stood up for that little girl. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. The officer faltered, caught off guard by the billionaire's wrath. Paramedics rushed in, lifting Ethan carefully from Michael's arms. As they carried him toward the ambulance, Michael looked down at the girl still clutching his sleeve. Her presence, her courage, had kept Ethan alive, and as pain throbbed through his bruised ribs and jaw, Michael felt a truth settle deep in his bones. His fortune, his empire, none of it mattered compared to this moment. He would not leave her behind. Not tonight. Not ever. Michael's chest still burned from the blows. Every inhale was sharp, his ribs screaming with protest. But he refused to show weakness. He stood at the edge of the ambulance, one hand gripping the side rail, watching as paramedics fitted an oxygen mask over Ethan's small face. The boy's lashes fluttered but didn't open. His lips, pale against the green mask, looked far too still. Michael wanted to climb in beside him, to demand answers, to shake the medics until they told him his son would be fine. But something tugged at his coat, small fingers, trembling but persistent. He looked down at the girl. She hadn't let go since he'd pulled Ethan into his arms back in the park. Even now, with sirens blaring and officers bustling, her tiny hand clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. Her eyes were enormous, shining under the strobe of red and blue. Dirt streaked her cheeks. There was fear there, yes, but also defiance, as if she had chosen him. And she wasn't about to surrender. "Sir," one of the officers said, stepping closer. He was tall, shoulders broad, uniform crisp, his voice all authority. "We need to question the girl. She was found at the scene. We can't ignore protocol." Michael straightened slowly, every muscle aching, but his voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Protocol can wait. That girl saved my son. She comes with us." The officer hesitated, glancing at his partner. The younger one muttered, "What if she's involved?" "She's 6 years old," Michael snapped. "Use your head. Do you think she orchestrated this?" For a moment no one spoke. The girl's grip tightened, as if bracing for them to drag her away. Michael bent slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Stay with me. Don't be afraid." Her lips quivered, but she nodded. The paramedics loaded Ethan fully into the ambulance. Michael climbed in without waiting for permission. The girl scrambled up behind him, and when an officer opened his mouth to object, Michael's glare silenced him. The doors slammed shut, sealing them inside with the hum of machinery and the stench of antiseptic. The ride was a blur of flashing lights and muted radio chatter. Michael sat hunched over Ethan, brushing hair from his forehead, whispering words the boy couldn't hear. Across from him, the girl sat stiff-backed, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting from Michael to Ethan to the swinging ivy bag above. "What's your name?" Michael asked finally. His voice came out softer than he expected. She looked startled to be addressed, then murmured, "Anna, Anna." He tested the name on his tongue. "You called me?" She nodded. "I saw his phone in his pocket. It had Dad on it. I thought, maybe you'd come." Michael swallowed. "You did the right thing." Her small shoulders sagged, relief flickering in her eyes. She looked at Ethan. He wouldn't wake up. I tried to shake him, but nothing worked. I was so scared. Michael clenched his jaw against the rush of emotion. He wanted to tell her she shouldn't have had to carry that fear, that she should have been playing with dolls or skipping rope instead of dragging an unconscious boy into the bushes. Instead, he reached across the narrow space and laid a hand gently over hers. "You were brave." The girl blinked quickly, as if unused to hearing such words. At the hospital, the medics rushed Ethan inside. Michael followed until a nurse blocked him at the door of the emergency ward. "We'll update you as soon as we can, Mr. Grant. Please wait." The words stung, but he knew better than to argue. He turned to find Anna hovering by his leg, torn between wanting to stay and fearing she'd be told to leave. Other officers were already in the lobby, eyeing her with suspicion. One whispered something to his partner and shook his head. Michael stepped in front of her, folding his arms. "She stays with me." "Mr. Grant," the officer began carefully, "until we know exactly what happened, we can't assume." "You don't have to assume anything," Michael cut in. His voice carried the steel of a man used to being obeyed. "You saw those men. You saw what they tried to do. This child shielded my son. If you have questions, you'll ask them in my presence. And until then, she is under my protection." "No." The officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly not eager to pick a fight with the billionaire in front of half a dozen reporters now gathering outside the glass doors. The hospital staff, accustomed to Michael's presence in philanthropic circles, were already murmuring about how quickly word would spread. Anna stood silently, half hidden behind him, her small hand clutching the back of his suit jacket. Michael lowered himself to one knee, bringing his eyes level with hers. "You're safe here, I promise." For the first time, her lips curved in something close to a smile, fleeting and fragile. Hours dragged in the sterile waiting room. Michael paced while Anna sat curled in a chair too big for her, eyes drooping but refusing to close. A nurse brought her a cup of apple juice, which she held with both hands as though it were treasure. Michael watched her sip, remembering how Ethan used to cling to his own cup of milk with that same ferocity, afraid someone might take it away. Finally, a doctor emerged, his expression grave but not hopeless. "Mr. Grant, your son was given a strong sedative. He's stable now, but it could have been catastrophic without immediate intervention. He'll need rest and monitoring, but we expect him to recover fully." Michael's knees nearly gave out. Relief crashed through him, leaving him shaky. "Can I see him?" "In time. He's being moved to observation. We'll let you know." Michael turned to Anna. She was watching him with wide, uncertain eyes, as though waiting for judgment. He crouched again, steadying himself on the armrest of her chair. "You saved his life, Anna." His voice cracked, the words carrying a weight he hadn't expected. "I won't forget that." Her cheeks flushed, and she ducked her head, but he saw her shoulders lift, straighter now, as if his words had given her a kind of armor. Outside the waiting room, Michael could hear the low hum of reporters and cameras. The story was already spreading. Billionaire's son, attacked in City Park, mysterious little girl involved. Soon the questions would come about the attackers, about Ethan, about Anna. And Michael knew the world would not be kind to a 6-year-old black girl found clutching the unconscious heir to one of the largest fortunes in America. He also knew he would not let the world devour her. Not now. Not ever. The night outside the hospital was restless. Red and blue lights still streaked across the glass as news vans crowded the curb, reporters leaning against barricades, microphones poised for the next headline. Michael sat in the corner of the waiting room, his phone buzzing endlessly with calls from board members, journalists, and investors. He ignored every one of them. His empire could wait. His son was lying unconscious just beyond a sterile wall, and beside him sat a little girl who had become the only witness to the nightmare. Anna dozed fitfully in the chair next to him, her small body curled up, arms folded tight as though protecting herself even in sleep. Michael studied her, how fragile she looked, bones too sharp beneath the skin, the hem of her dress frayed. He wondered how many nights she had slept this way, in corners and chairs, always braced against a world too harsh for a child. He thought of Ethan's bed at home, covered in toy dinosaurs and soft blankets, and the unfairness cut him like glass. A detective appeared, clipboard in hand, tie loosened, face marked by fatigue. "Mr. Grant." His tone was polite but firm. "We need to go over the details. You said 2 men attacked you at the park?" Michael nodded. His ribs ached as he shifted. "Yes. They came out of the shadows. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They just struck. If it weren't for the sirens," his jaw tightened, "they would have used a knife." The detective jotted notes, then glanced at Anna. "And this girl, she was already with your son when you arrived?" "She was protecting him," Michael said. "She called me from his phone when he collapsed. Without her, I might not have found him in time." The detective's pen hovered. "We still need her statement. She might have seen something useful." Michael looked at Anna. Her eyelids fluttered, caught between sleep and the weight of the world. He laid a hand on her shoulder. Gentle. "Anna, sweetheart, can you tell the detective what you saw?" She blinked, sat up straighter, and rubbed her eyes. Her voice was small but clear. "I was near the fountain. I like to sit there sometimes. I saw your boy, Ethan. He was playing by himself. Then 2 men came. One gave him a toy, a shiny car. He smiled, but when he touched it, he started to fall. They laughed." Her hands twisted together. "I was scared. I dragged him behind the bushes so they wouldn't take him. I found the phone in his pocket and called." The detective leaned forward. "You saw their faces?" Anna shook her head quickly. "They wore hoods. I only saw their shoes. Black. Big." She swallowed hard. "One of them had a scar on his hand." She traced a line across her palm to show him. The detective scribbled, "That's helpful." but his eyes flicked to Michael. Skeptical, as though unsure whether to trust the testimony of a 6-year-old. Michael caught the look and felt heat rise in his chest. "You'll treat her words as evidence," he said sharply. "Don't dismiss her because of who she is." The detective cleared his throat. "Of course, Mr. Grant. We'll follow up." When he left, Michael exhaled slowly, unclenching his fists. Anna was watching him, wide-eyed. "You believe me?" she whispered. "Yes," he said firmly. "I believe you." Her shoulders relaxed, just a little. She leaned back in the chair, exhaustion reclaiming her. Hours slipped by. Nurses passed through the waiting room, their shoes squeaking softly against polished linoleum. Michael's assistant appeared at one point, breathless, holding out a tablet. "Sir, the press is demanding a statement. Your stock." Michael cut her off with a single glance. Not now. His empire could weather rumors. His son could not. At last, a nurse approached with a smile. "Mr. Grant, your son is awake. He's asking for you." Relief flooded him. Michael rose too quickly, his ribs protesting, but he didn't care. He turned to Anna. "Come with me." Her eyes widened. "Me?" "Yes." He extended his hand. She hesitated, then slipped her small fingers into his palm. Together they followed the nurse down the corridor, past humming machines and closed doors, until they reached a quiet room. Ethan lay in a narrow bed, cheeks flushed but eyes open. When he saw his father, he tried to sit up, but the tubes and wires held him down. Michael was at his side in an instant, smoothing his hair back, voice breaking. "Ethan." "Thank God." Ethan's gaze shifted past his father to Anna. His lips moved, voice barely more than a whisper. "Dad." "She saved me." Michael swallowed hard. He looked at Anna, then back at his son. "I know," he said softly. "I know she did." Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them back. This was not a moment for weakness. This was a moment to remember, to etch into the marrow of his bones. His son alive, the little girl who had made it possible standing at his side. The nurse gave them space, slipping quietly out the door. Michael sat by the bed, Ethan's hand in his. Anna perched awkwardly in a chair by the wall. For the first time all night, a fragile calm settled over the room. Yet beneath it, Michael felt the stirrings of something darker. Those men hadn't been random predators. They'd been precise, silent, deliberate. They had targeted his son. And if they had failed tonight, they would not stop trying. Michael Grant had built his life on control, on eliminating risk. But tonight he had been blindsided. And he knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this was only the beginning. He glanced at Anna. She was humming softly, trying to comfort herself in the strange hospital room, her small hands folded in her lap. Against all odds, she had stood between his son and danger. He owed her more than gratitude. He owed her protection. He leaned back in the chair, exhaustion pulling at him, but his mind already turning like the gears of the empire he commanded. He would find out who had done this. He would tear apart every shadow in the city, until the men who dared to touch his son were unmasked. And until that day came, he would make sure Anna was safe. Because tonight had proven one thing with clarity. She was now part of the story, whether she had chosen it or not. The hospital corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, each step echoing against cold linoleum as Michael followed the nurse out of Ethan's room. Ethan had fallen asleep again, the sedatives pulling him back into rest, his tiny chest rising and falling with measured rhythm. Michael had stayed by his bedside until the boy's hand finally loosened from his own, a small grip fading into slumber. Now, outside, the world pressed back in the detectives waiting with questions. The press camped just beyond the lobby doors, and Anna, the girl who had upended everything, she walked beside him, clutching the edge of his jacket with her small fingers. She moved lightly, almost like a shadow, but every so often she glanced up at him as if checking to be sure he hadn't disappeared. Michael slowed his stride so she could keep pace. Detective Harris intercepted them in the hallway, his tired eyes sharp. "Mr. Grant, I need another moment of your time. Alone." His gaze flicked to Anna. The girl should be in protective custody until we sort this out. Michael straightened. She stays with me. Mr. Grant, Harris began carefully, she may have information, yes, but she's also a potential liability. If the men come looking, then they'll answer to me, Michael cut in. His voice was iron, his stare unyielding. She called me when no one else did. She shielded my son. That makes her my responsibility. The detective's jaw tightened. At least let us send her back to the orphanage until this settles. Michael looked down at Anna. Her eyes had widened at the word orphanage, her knuckles white on his jacket. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, lips pressed tight. No, Michael said flatly. She stays. Harris sighed, scribbling something in his notebook. Very well, but I'll need her statement on record. We'll arrange it tomorrow. He stepped aside, letting them pass. Michael led Anna toward a quieter waiting area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting pale shadows across the worn vinyl chairs. Anna slid into one, her feet not reaching the floor. She stared at her shoes, mismatched, too small, and picked at the frayed hem of her dress. Michael sat across from her, watching silently for a moment. He had spent his life reading board members, investors, rivals, men and women who masked greed behind polite smiles. But this little girl wore no mask. Her face was raw with exhaustion, fear, and something else. Determination far too old for her age. Anna, he said gently, I need to know more about what happened before I arrived. Can you tell me? Her hands twisted together in her lap. She bit her lip, then nodded slowly. I was sitting by the fountain. I go there sometimes, when I don't want to be at the home. The home? The orphanage, she whispered. It's loud there. And sometimes, the older kids aren't nice. She risked a glance at him. So I sneak out. The park feels safer. Michael's chest tightened. The idea of a park at night being safer than the place meant to shelter her was bitterly ironic. I saw your boy. He was playing with a red ball. Then two men came. They had hoods up. One of them gave him a toy car. Shiny. With lights. He liked it. He laughed. But then he touched it and... Her voice faltered. He fell down. Just like that. She snapped her fingers. Michael leaned forward. And you? What did you do? Her chin lifted, though her eyes glistened. I pulled him into the bushes. They didn't see us. I held his hand so he wouldn't be alone. Then I found his phone. It had Dad. I thought maybe you'd care. The last words pierced Michael. Maybe you'd care. She hadn't expected it. She had gambled on a stranger answering, a gamble most 6-year-olds shouldn't even understand. He reached across and rested his hand over hers. I do care. You saved him, Anna. You saved my son. Her lips trembled into the hint of a smile, fleeting but real. A nurse approached then, holding a tray. She should eat something, she said kindly, setting down a sandwich and a carton of milk. She looks like she hasn't had a proper meal in days. Anna's eyes widened at the food. She whispered a thank you and reached carefully, as though expecting someone to snatch it away. She devoured the sandwich in small, quick bites, pausing only to sip the milk. Michael watched, his chest heavy. He thought of the meals that went untouched at his penthouse table. Gourmet dishes abandoned after 2 bites, while staff cleared plates. Here was a child treating a simple sandwich like a feast. When she finished, she wiped her mouth on the back of her hand, then flushed as though embarrassed. Sorry, she murmured. You don't have to apologize, Michael said quietly. Not to me. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. The hospital settled into its hushed rhythm. Distant announcements, rolling gurneys, the occasional cough echoing down the halls. Michael leaned back, exhaustion pressing down on him. He closed his eyes briefly, but images chased him. Ethan's limp body, the glint of the knife, Anna's trembling voice on the phone. He opened them again to find Anna curled sideways in the chair, head resting against the armrest, already asleep. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She looked impossibly small in the sterile room, like a lost sparrow. Michael stood slowly, walked to the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, skyscrapers glowing like beacons of wealth and power. Once, he had believed those towers were his shield, proof that he had conquered the chaos of his youth, but tonight had stripped that illusion bare. Money hadn't saved his son. A stranger had. A child. He turned back to Anna, sleeping fitfully. Her small body curled against the cold. Something in him shifted again. Deeper this time. She was not his blood, not his family. Yet she had risked herself without hesitation. That kind of loyalty could not be bought. Michael sank into the chair beside her, lowering his voice though she could not hear him. "You won't be alone anymore, Anna. I swear it." He leaned back, eyes heavy, the vow echoing in the silence. Beyond the waiting room doors, cameras flashed, headlines brewed, and shadows plotted. But here, for this fragile hour, it was only a man, a sleeping child, and the promise of protection binding them together. The morning light slipped through the hospital blinds, washing the waiting room in muted gold. Michael woke with a start, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. For a moment, disorientation gripped him. White walls, the sterile hum of machines, the faint scent of antiseptic. Then his eyes landed on the small figure curled in the chair beside him. Anna. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, her chin resting on them, dark curls tumbling over her face. She was awake, watching him with cautious eyes. "You didn't leave," she whispered, as if surprised. Michael sat up straighter, rolling his shoulders against the ache. "I said I wouldn't." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "People say things all the time. Then they go." The words landed heavier than they should have, and Michael had no answer. He'd spent his life making promises to investors, employees, partners, promises about profits and mergers, yet he realized he had rarely promised anything that truly mattered. Until last night. Before he could reply, Detective Harris appeared at the doorway, his expression taut. "Mr. Grant, we recovered footage from a traffic camera near the park. You should see this." Michael stood, Anna instantly hopping down from her chair to follow. Harris raised a brow at the child trailing behind but said nothing, leading them to a small office. A grainy video flickered on the screen. Two men in hooded jackets pacing near the fountain. Then Ethan appeared, bouncing his red ball, oblivious. One man reached into his pocket, pulled out the toy car. Ethan bent to look, delighted, and within seconds, his small frame went slack. Michael's jaw tightened. Even in grainy black and white, the sight of his boy collapsing cut through him like a blade. Anna gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hands. "That's them. That's what I saw." Harris nodded. "They fled when sirens approached. We're running their images through the system, but so far nothing." He paused, studying Michael. "This wasn't random. They targeted your son." Michael's gaze darkened. "Then find them." The detective hesitated. "We will. But until we do, you and your boy and anyone tied to this are in danger. That includes her." He nodded toward Anna. Anna stiffened, her wide eyes darting between them. Michael placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I already told you. She stays with me." "Then be careful," Harris said grimly. "These men don't back off easily." After the detective left, Michael exhaled, forcing the tension from his shoulders. He crouched to Anna's level. "You see why it's important you stay close?" She nodded quickly, curls bouncing. "I will." Later that day, after Ethan was moved to a private room, Michael stepped outside the hospital for the first time since the ordeal. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions. "Mr. Grant, is it true your son was attacked? Who's the little girl with you? Is she connected to the suspects?" Michael shielded Anna with his arm as they pushed through the chaos toward his car. Her small fingers dug into his sleeve. A reporter's camera flashed, and Anna flinched, pressing her face into his side. Inside the car, silence settled, broken only by the hum of the engine. Anna stared out the window, eyes distant. "Are you all right?" Michael asked. She shrugged. They looked at me like I did something wrong. Michael's chest tightened. He recognized the weight in her voice, not fear of strangers, but the sting of being judged, dismissed. You didn't. You did everything right. Remember that. The car turned onto a quieter street. Michael gestured toward the window. We're going back to the park. I need to see it in daylight. Her head whipped around. The park? But what if they come back? They won't. Not today. The police are watching, but I need to understand what happened. When they arrived, the park looked deceptively ordinary. Children ran across the grass. Parents strolled with coffee cups. Joggers circled the paths. But Michael felt only the memory of last night's shadows, the place where his world had nearly been torn apart. He led Anna to the fountain. She pointed to the hedge. There. That's where I hid him. Her small hand trembled as she touched the leaves, her voice dropping. I thought they'd see us. I thought. She trailed off, biting her lip. Michael crouched beside her. But they didn't. You kept him safe. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I was so scared, but I couldn't let them take him. Michael studied her, this child who had faced down men twice her size with nothing but courage and instinct. His ribs still ached from their blows, his jaw still throbbed, but none of that mattered compared to what she had done. He placed a hand on her small shoulder, steady and sure. You were braver than most grown men would have been, Anna. Don't ever forget that. For a moment, she just stared at him, as though unsure how to accept the words. Then, slowly, she nodded. A gust of wind stirred the fountain's spray, scattering droplets across their faces. Michael rose, scanning the park one last time. Somewhere in the city, the men who had tried to take his son were still out there, and he knew now, with absolute certainty, that this fight would not end until he brought them down. But as he looked at Anna, standing so small against the backdrop of the city, he also knew something else. Protecting his son meant protecting her. Their fates had tangled together the moment she had picked up that phone. He reached down, taking her hand. Come on, we have work to do. Her small fingers curled into his, firm and certain. For the first time, she didn't look like a shadow of fear. She looked like someone who belonged at his side. By the time Michael and Anna returned to the hospital, the day had shifted into a whirlwind. Reporters crowded the lobby despite security's best efforts, their voices echoing against marble floors. Headlines were already splashed across the morning news. Billionaire's son, targeted, in park attack. Yet woven into the frenzy was another, darker thread. Who was the girl at his side? Michael tightened his grip on Anna's hand as they pushed past cameras. She clung close, her small frame half hidden by his suit jacket. Security ushered them into a quieter hallway, but the questions followed, shouted from behind the barriers. Mr. Grant, is the girl a suspect? Why was your son alone with her in the park? Is she connected to the attackers? Anna flinched with each accusation, her eyes dropping to the floor. Michael's jaw clenched. The cruelty of strangers was nothing new to him. He had seen boardrooms destroy reputations in a single whisper, but hearing it aimed at a child cut deeper than he expected. Inside Ethan's room, the boy stirred, blinking weakly. Michael moved quickly to his side, relief flooding him, as Ethan's small hand curled around his. Dad, he murmured, voice hoarse. I'm here, son. Michael brushed the boy's hair from his forehead. You're safe now. Ethan's gaze drifted to Anna, who hovered nervously near the doorway. You stayed, he whispered. His lips curved faintly. You saved me. Anna's cheeks flushed. She shifted on her feet, unsure how to respond. Michael caught her hesitation and felt something twist inside him. This child had done more than most adults would have dared, yet she stood as if she expected to be punished instead of praised. A knock interrupted the moment. Detective Harris stepped in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. His eyes landed on Anna. Mr. Grant, we need to take the girl for questioning now. Michael straightened, shielding her instinctively. You'll question her here. In my presence. Harris's mouth thinned. Sir, procedure requires. Procedure, Michael cut in, his voice low but sharp. does not override common sense. She is 6 years old. You will not drag her into an interrogation room like a criminal." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One muttered, "But she was at the scene." "She was the reason my son is alive," Michael snapped. "You want to build your case, fine. But you'll do it without treating her like she's guilty of something." "Duh." Anna shrank against his side, eyes wide, small hand clutching his sleeve. Harris exhaled through his nose. "Very well. We'll make an exception." He pulled a chair closer. "Anna, can you sit here and tell us again what you saw?" Her gaze darted to Michael, searching for reassurance. He gave a small nod. "It's all right. Just tell the truth." Anna climbed into the chair, her legs swinging nervously. She spoke in halting words at first, then with growing steadiness. About the men in the park, the toy car, the way Ethan had collapsed, and how she had hidden him. Her voice wavered when she described the men's laughter, but she pressed on, determined. When she finished, Harris nodded slowly. "Thank you, Anna. That was very brave." But as he turned to leave, Michael caught the faint doubt in his eyes. He knew that looked too well the silent calculation of a man deciding what was useful and what could be discarded. After the detectives left, Michael sat heavily, rubbing his temples. Anna perched on the edge of her chair, watching him with worried eyes. "Did I do something wrong?" she whispered. Michael looked up sharply. "No. You did everything right. But they looked at me like—" Her voice faltered. "Like I was bad." Michael's throat tightened. He thought of the reporters outside, of the suspicious glances from the officers, of the way even Harris, with all his professionalism, had struggled to see her as more than a complication. He reached across and took her small hand in his. "People don't always see the truth right away. Sometimes they let fear or prejudice blind them. But I see you, Anna. I know what you did." Her eyes shimmered, and she whispered, "You believe me?" "Yes," he said firmly, "and I won't let anyone treat you like you're anything less than the hero you are." Silence stretched, broken only by the beeping monitors. Michael leaned back, exhaustion tugging at him. But inside he felt a new resolve hardening. The men who had attacked his son were dangerous, but so was the system that would rather doubt a little girl than face the truth. He would fight both, if he had to. Outside the door, the murmur of reporters swelled again. The world was waiting for a statement, for a story to latch onto. Michael knew the narrative would twist if he didn't act. He looked at Anna, still holding his hand as if it were a lifeline, and made his decision. If the world wanted a story, he would give them one. But it wouldn't be of suspicion or scandal. It would be of truth of a child's courage, and of a father who refused to let her be forgotten. The soft glow of fluorescent bulbs bathed the hospital corridors in pale light, an endless hum of machines and footsteps filling the air. Michael hadn't left Ethan's side for hours. He sat by the boy's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, listening to the beeping monitor as though it were the only sound that mattered. Ethan's cheeks had regained some color, but he still looked fragile, too fragile for a child who only yesterday had been laughing over toy blocks in their penthouse. Anna sat in the chair opposite the bed, her legs dangling, her head nodding with fatigue. A blanket borrowed from a nurse was draped over her shoulders. She had refused to lie down fully, as though afraid she'd be sent away if she closed her eyes. Michael had tried to coax her to rest, but the girl had only shaken her head stubbornly, whispering, "What if he needs me?" That stubborn loyalty gnawed at him. She didn't owe Ethan anything, yet she held vigil with the devotion of family. Detective Harris reappeared mid-morning, carrying a folder. His face was lined with exhaustion, his shirt wrinkled, tie loosened. He nodded at Michael. "Mr. Grant, we've confirmed your son was given a sedative, likely slipped into his system through skin contact with the toy. The toxicology report shows a high dose. Another 15 minutes without help." He didn't finish the sentence. Michael's stomach twisted. He forced himself to keep his voice even. "But he'll recover?" "Yes," Harris said, glancing at Ethan. "He's lucky. Someone was looking out for him." His eyes flicked briefly to Anna. The girl stiffened under the weight of his gaze, fingers tightening on the blanket. Michael leaned forward. You mean she was looking out for him? Don't skirt around it. Harris cleared his throat, moving on. We also pulled some partial prints from the toy car. Nothing in the system yet. But this wasn't random. Whoever these men are, they knew what they were doing. This is professional. Michael's jaw tightened. Then find them before they try again. The detective hesitated. There's more. Your security detail reported unusual activity near your residence last week. Unmarked vans parked for hours, men loitering. Nothing illegal. But suspicious. We believe your family is being watched. Michael felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. And no one thought to tell me? We didn't have enough to connect the dots, Harris said evenly. Now we do. Which means from this moment, your son isn't just a victim, he's a target. And this girl, he nodded toward Anna again, she's a witness. That puts her in danger too. Anna's eyes widened. She shrank into the blanket, whispering, "They'll come for me?" Michael reached over, resting a hand on her small shoulder. "Not while I'm here," he said firmly. He turned back to Harris. "She stays under my protection. Mr. Grant, that's not standard procedure. She should be placed in protective custody with child services." Michael's voice dropped to steel. "No. She stays with me." Harris studied him for a long moment, then exhaled, defeated. "Fine. But you're responsible for her safety until we sort this out." He closed the folder. "I'll station an officer outside this room. Keep the doors locked." After he left, silence settled. Michael sank back into the chair beside Ethan's bed, rubbing his temples. Anna watched him carefully, as if weighing his words. "You really mean it," she whispered. He looked up. "Mean what?" "That you'll keep me safe." Michael held her gaze. "Yes, I don't break promises." She swallowed, then whispered, "Most people do." The honesty in her voice stung. Michael leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He had broken promises before missed birthdays, empty assurances to Ethan that he'd be home for dinner. The hollow vow to his late wife that he'd put family before work. But this protecting Ethan, protecting Anna, this was a promise he couldn't afford to fail. Hours later, as the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, a nurse entered quietly with a tray of food. She set it on the table and gave Anna a gentle smile. "You must be hungry, sweetheart. Eat while it's warm." Anna's eyes darted to Michael, waiting for permission. He nodded. She slid to the edge of her chair, lifted the cover, and gasped softly. A bowl of macaroni and cheese, still steaming, and a cookie wrapped in paper. She picked up the fork awkwardly, as if she weren't used to utensils, then began to eat in small, careful bites. After a few minutes, she looked up, almost guilty. "It's really good." Michael's throat tightened. "You'll have more like that from now on." Her brows furrowed. "Why?" "Because you deserve it." The words seemed to confuse her, as though she had never heard them before. She turned back to her food, silent. That night, when the hospital quieted and the corridors dimmed, Michael stood by the window, watching the city lights blink to life. Behind him, Ethan slept peacefully. And Anna, wrapped in her blanket, finally drifted into deep slumber. For the first time since the call in the boardroom, Michael let himself breathe. But beneath the fragile calm, his mind burned. Someone had tried to take his son. Someone had dared invade the one part of his life that was untouchable. He had enemies in business, rivals who envied his empire, men who despised him for deals won and fortunes gained. But now the fight had crossed into blood, into family. Michael clenched his fists at his sides. Whoever they were, they had made the gravest mistake of their lives. The next morning brought no peace. Michael had barely slept, his body aching from the blows he'd taken in the park, but it was the weight of unanswered questions that kept him restless. He sat by Ethan's bedside, his hand resting gently over his son's, as if sheer contact could anchor the boy in safety. The monitors beeped steadily, offering some comfort, though Michael's mind refused to settle. Anna was awake earlier than anyone expected. She sat cross-legged in the chair by the window, staring out at the city skyline with an intensity far beyond her years. The blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, and she clutched the edge like armor. When Michael finally turned to her, she whispered, Do you think they'll come back? Michael's jaw tightened. Not here. Not with security posted outside. But they'll try again somewhere else, if we don't stop them. Her small hands fidgeted. Because of Ethan? Yes. His voice hardened. Because of me. Before Anna could ask more, Detective Harris arrived, carrying a slim folder. His expression was grim, the shadows under his eyes deeper than the night before. Mr. Grant, we've learned a little more. He set the folder on the table, flipping it open. Photographs slid out grainy shots of the toy car, the footprints by the fountain, a blurry freeze frame of the two men caught on camera. We analyzed the toy, Harris explained. It was coated with a sedative compound fast, acting, nearly impossible to trace without a lab. The prints we found don't match anyone in our system. Whoever we're dealing with, they know how to cover their tracks. Vry. Michael leaned forward, eyes locked on the photos. You're telling me this was professional, planned? Yes. Harris confirmed. Not a random attack. Someone orchestrated this. Michael's stomach churned. He thought of the mergers he'd crushed, the competitors left behind, the powerful enemies he'd made climbing to the top. Any one of them might have motive, but this wasn't about stocks or contracts. They had gone after Ethan, his 5-year-old boy. Do you have suspects? Michael pressed. Not yet. Harris shook his head. But we're combing through known groups who specialize in kidnappings for ransom. The use of chemicals suggests sophistication. This wasn't two thugs acting on impulse. Michael exhaled slowly, fury coiled tight in his chest. Anna shifted in her chair, her small voice breaking the tension. I saw something, she whispered. Both men turned to her. She hesitated, then continued. One of them had a scar on his hand, like a line. I forgot to say last night. She traced a finger across her palm. Harris scribbled notes quickly. That could help. Good job, Anna. But Anna's expression didn't brighten at the praise. Instead, she looked down, her shoulders curling inward. Michael frowned. What's wrong? They still think I'm trouble, she said quietly. I can see it. Even when I tell the truth, they look at me like I'm lying. Harris opened his mouth, but Michael raised a hand, silencing him. He crouched beside Anna's chair, meeting her eyes. You told the truth, Anna. And I believe you. That's what matters. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded slightly, as though clinging to his words like a lifeline. After Harris left, Michael sank into the chair opposite Ethan's bed, rubbing his temples. The weight of the empire he had built pressed on him: companies, assets, properties, but all of it felt useless in the face of shadowy men slipping into parks with poisoned toys. A knock came at the door. His assistant, Catherine, entered briskly, a tablet in hand. Sir, the press is relentless. They're running stories about the attack. And about... Her eyes flicked to Anna. Her. Michael's voice sharpened. What about her? Some outlets are speculating she was involved. Catherine lowered her voice. They're questioning why a child from the orphanage was alone in the park with Ethan. It doesn't look enough. Michael's tone was like steel snapping. She saved him. If they can't see that, I'll make them. Anna shrank into her blanket, eyes darting away. Michael softened his voice, turning to her. Don't listen to any of that. They're wrong. People like to twist the truth. But I'll make sure the world knows who you are. That evening, Michael left Ethan briefly in the care of the nurses. He took Anna to the cafeteria, wanting to give her something normal, something human. The fluorescent-lit space buzzed with families, doctors, and late-night staff. Michael guided her to the counter, where the aroma of coffee and warm food filled the air. Anna's eyes went wide at the choices: trays of sandwiches, fruit cups, hot soup steaming in metal bins. She lingered over the desserts, her gaze locked on a slice of chocolate cake behind the glass. Michael ordered 2 meals and added the cake without a second thought. At the table, Anna ate slowly at first, as though testing whether it was really hers. When she reached the cake, her small fork hesitated before she took a bite. Her eyes closed briefly, savoring it. And for the first time, Michael saw her look like what she was, a child. "Good?" he asked. She nodded quickly, crumbs on her lips. "The best." He leaned back, watching her with an ache in his chest. His son had nearly been stolen from him. This little girl had saved him. And yet the world wanted to paint her as suspect instead of savior. Not on his watch. When they returned to Ethan's room, Michael found Harris waiting with an update. "We've traced the scar detail to a known associate in a group tied to abductions. It's a lead, but not much yet." Michael's voice was firm. "Then you follow it. I'll put my resources behind this investigation. Money won't be an obstacle." Harris nodded, though his eyes held a flicker of unease. Michael didn't care. Whoever had come for his boy had stepped into a war they couldn't win. Later, as Ethan slept, Michael sat in the dim room with Anna beside him, both of them silent. The city glowed beyond the window, indifferent to their little pocket of crisis. Michael reached out, resting his hand lightly on Anna's shoulder. "You're safe now. Both of you are. And I won't stop until those men are caught." Anna looked up at him, her face tired but hopeful. "Promise?" He met her gaze steadily. "Promise." The next morning, the hospital was quieter than usual. Ethan was awake now, sitting up in his bed with a juice box in hand, pale but stronger. Michael had hardly left his side, though he stepped out briefly to make calls arranging additional security for the hospital, reaching out to private investigators, and warning his legal team to prepare for anything. Every instinct told him this wasn't over. Anna sat in the corner of the room, her legs swinging nervously as she watched the father and son together. She didn't speak until Ethan dozed off again, his small chest rising and falling steadily. "Mr. Grant," she whispered. Michael turned, his voice softening. "Yes, Anna?" Her small fingers twisted together. "Do you want to know about me?" He studied her for a moment. He had been so consumed with protecting Ethan that he hadn't thought to ask about the girl who had changed everything. He nodded. "Yes, Anna. Tell me your story." She hesitated, then slid off her chair, walking closer to the window where morning light spilled in. She stood there, her back to him, as though it was easier to speak without looking him in the eye. "I don't remember my parents much," she began. "Just pieces, a smell of soap, a song. They died when I was little. People said it was a fire. After that, I went to the home." Her voice grew small. "The orphanage?" Michael felt something in his chest tighten. He had assumed she had family somewhere, but hearing the stark truth in her voice was like a blow. "The home is not nice," she continued carefully. "There's not enough food. The older kids push you around. If you cry, they laugh. Sometimes, I sneak out to the park. I like it better there. People smile. Even if they don't talk to me, I can pretend I belong." She hugged her small arms around herself. "That's where I was when I saw Ethan." Her voice cracked. She pressed her forehead against the window. "When he fell, I thought he was dead, and I was so scared, but I couldn't leave him. I didn't want him to be alone." Michael stood slowly, crossing the room. He rested a hand on her narrow shoulder. She stiffened, but didn't pull away. "You did more than anyone could have asked," he said quietly. "You saved him. And you gave me back my son." Anna's breath hitched. "But the police, the reporters, they don't think so. They look at me like I'm bad. Like I did something wrong." Michael knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. "Anna, listen to me. The world doesn't always see clearly. They let fear, or worse, prejudice, blind them. But the truth is stronger, and I'll make sure they hear it. You're not bad. You're brave." Tears shimmered in her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly, as if crying were something she wasn't allowed. She nodded once, fiercely. The door opened then, and Detective Harris stepped inside, followed by another officer. He carried a recorder and a small notepad. "Mr. Grant, we need an official statement from the girl. With your permission, we'll record it here." Michael placed himself between them and Anna. "Only if I'm present. And she's treated with respect." Harris nodded, pulling up a chair. "Anna, Can you tell us what you told Mr. Grant? Just in your own words? Anna sat on the edge of the chair, her legs swinging nervously. She repeated the story she had told before the men, the toy car, the way Ethan had collapsed. But this time, she added more. One of them laughed, she whispered, her hands twisting together, like it was funny. The other one. He had a scar on his hand. And his shoes were shiny. Not like sneakers. Like the kind men wear to work. Harris scribbled furiously. That's good, Anna. Very good. The younger officer, however, frowned. But she could be making this up. Kids imagine things all the time. Michael's voice cut through the room like a blade. She's telling the truth. The officer flushed, mumbling an apology. Harris raised a hand to quiet the room. It's okay. Anna, thank you. This helps. When they left, Anna sagged with relief. I thought they'd take me away. Michael sat beside her. Not while I'm here. For a moment, silence lingered between them. Then Anna whispered, Why do you care? You don't even know me. Michael studied her small, wary face. The question hit harder than he expected. Why did he care? He had spent years walling himself off, burying himself in business, ignoring even Ethan more often than he wanted to admit. But now, here was this child bruised by life, mistrusted by strangers who had shown him more courage than men twice her age. Because you matter, he said finally. His voice was steady, certain, and no one has told you that enough. Her lips parted, as though she wanted to argue, but no words came. Instead, she just looked at him, her eyes wide and glistening, as if hearing those words had cracked something open inside her. Later that evening, as Ethan slept again, Michael sat by the window with Anna curled in the chair beside him, the blanket drawn up to her chin. Outside, the city pulsed with restless energy, cars streaking through the night. Michael's phone buzzed with messages from investors demanding explanations. He silenced it without a second thought. For once, the empire could wait. Right now, his world was in this room. His son, alive because of a stranger. And the stranger herself, who was no longer a stranger at all. Michael glanced at Anna. She had drifted off, her breathing soft. Her small frame relaxed for the first time since he'd met her. He thought of her words, "Why do you care?" and knew the answer would shape everything that came next, because he had no choice. Because fate had placed her in his path. Because she had saved his boy when the world had turned its back. And because, for the first time in years, Michael Grant wanted to be more than a businessman. He wanted to be the man both Ethan and Anna needed him to be. The following morning dawned gray, the kind of New York day where the sky seemed heavy with secrets. Michael stood by the hospital window, his hands braced on the sill, watching the traffic crawl below. Inside, the room was quiet. Ethan still slept, his small frame tangled in hospital sheets, the monitors steady. Across the room, Anna curled on the chair, wrapped in the hospital blanket. She looked fragile in the soft light, her thin arms tucked under her chin. Michael's phone buzzed again, another call from the board. He ignored it. He could already imagine the voices on the other end. Michael, the stock is slipping. Michael, the investors are nervous. Michael, you need to control the narrative. He almost laughed at the absurdity. Control. As if any of them knew what control meant when a man's child was targeted in the middle of a city park. A knock came at the door. Catherine, his assistant, slipped inside. Her expression was tight, her tone low. "Sir, we need to talk." Michael straightened but didn't move from the window. "About the company?" "About everything," she replied carefully. She cast a glance at Anna before continuing. "The press is relentless. They've dug into her background. They're painting her as a runaway, a troublemaker. Some are even suggesting she lured Ethan to the park." Michael turned sharply, his voice a razor. "That's a lie." "I know," Catherine said quickly, holding up her hands. "But perception matters. Right now, the story is out of your hands." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then I'll take it back. I'll speak myself." Catherine hesitated. If you do, you'll be tying yourself to her, to every rumor, every accusation. Michael looked across the room. Anna was awake now, watching them with wide, guarded eyes, as if she already knew they were speaking about her. He crossed the floor and knelt in front of her, ignoring Catherine's warning look. Anna, he said gently, do you understand what's happening outside? She shook her head slightly. They don't like me. They don't know you, he corrected. They don't know what you did. But I do. Ethan does. And I won't let them say otherwise. Her small lips trembled. What if they take me away? Michael reached for her hand, steady and certain. They won't, not while I'm here. Catherine shifted uneasily. Sir, that's final, Michael cut in, his tone leaving no room for debate. Hours later, Michael walked into the hospital's press room, the cameras already flashing. Reporters clamored, microphones shoved forward, the air buzzing with tension. He adjusted his tie, stood tall, and faced them with the practiced confidence of a man who had built an empire, but this time, it wasn't about stocks or profits. My son, Ethan, was the target of an attack, Michael began, his voice steady. He is alive today because of one person, Anna, a 6-year-old girl who showed more courage than most men I've met in my lifetime. The room fell silent. She found him when he collapsed. She hid him from his attackers, and she called me with his phone. Without her, my boy would not be here. So let me make this clear, anyone who dares question her, anyone who paints her as anything but the hero she is, will answer to me. The flash of cameras was blinding. Questions erupted, shouted all at once. Mr. Grant, are you planning to adopt her? Will she be placed under your protection? Do you believe this attack was connected to your business rivals? Michael raised a hand, silencing them. The investigation is ongoing, but I will say this. Whoever was behind this chose the wrong family to target. We will find them, and we will make sure they never touch another child again. When he left the podium, Catherine caught his arm. That was a declaration of war, Michael. He met her eyes. It already was. Back upstairs, Anna sat with Ethan, who was now awake and sipping juice through a straw. Michael crouched beside them. What happened? Ethan asked softly. Michael smoothed his hair. I told the truth. About you. About Anna. Anna's eyes widened. You told them? Yes, Michael said firmly. The world needed to hear it, and now they know who you are. For the first time since he'd met her, Anna's lips curved into a true smile, not timid, not fleeting, but warm and real. You kept your promise. Michael felt the words settle deep inside him. He had. And he would again. That night, as the city glowed outside and Ethan drifted back to sleep, Michael sat in the chair between his son's bed and Anna's blanket-covered chair. He looked at them both, the child he had nearly lost and the child he had unexpectedly gained. 2 lives bound together by danger, by courage, by fate. And Michael knew this was only the beginning. The men who had orchestrated the attack were still out there, still watching. But he had something now he hadn't had before: clarity. He would fight for his son. He would fight for Anna. And no amount of money, power, or threat would shake that resolve. The following evening, the hospital halls were quieter, but Michael felt no peace. He had made his public stand earlier that day, declaring Anna a hero. The cameras had eaten it up, but he knew the men behind the attack had heard it too. Somewhere in the city, they were listening. Somewhere, they were planning their next move. Ethan slept soundly in his hospital bed, his small chest rising and falling, his face pale but calmer now. Anna, wrapped in her blanket, sat close to the bed, tracing shapes on the armrest with her finger, humming softly under her breath. She stopped when Michael approached, her wide eyes lifting to him. "Why are you still standing there?" she asked. "You look like you're waiting for something." Michael pulled a chair closer, lowering himself heavily into it. "Because I am," he admitted. "I'm waiting for them to make their next mistake." Anna's brows furrowed. "The bad men?" "Yes." He rested his elbows on his knees, his voice quiet but edged with steel. "They tried once. They'll try again. And when they do, I'll be ready." Anna shivered under the blanket. "What if they come here? They won't get past me." Before she could respond, a knock came at the door. Detective Harris entered, his expression even grimmer than usual. "Mr. Grant, we need to talk privately." His eyes flicked to Anna. "She stays," Michael said firmly. Harris hesitated but nodded. "Fine. We've identified the man with the scar. His name's Victor Malone. Career criminal. Extortion. Kidnapping. Hired muscle for whoever pays enough. He's tied to an organization with international reach. Dangerous people." Michael's jaw hardened. "Who hired him? That's the problem. We don't know yet. But Victor doesn't move without orders. Someone with power wanted your son." Anna tugged on Michael's sleeve, whispering, "I saw his hand. I'll never forget it." Harris gave her a small nod. "That might be what helps us. But Mr. Grant, there's something else. We intercepted chatter on a secure channel. They're angry. They know the girl spoke out. They called her a problem. A loose end." Anna froze, her small hands gripping the blanket tighter. Her lips trembled. "They want me?" Michael's voice dropped to a growl. "They'll never touch her." Harris looked him dead in the eye. "Then you need to move her. Both of them. The hospital isn't safe anymore." Michael rose to his feet. "I'll arrange it." Within hours, Michael's private security had doubled. Armed guards were stationed at every exit, and a secure SUV waited in the loading bay. The press caught wind of the commotion, their voices rising in the lobby, cameras flashing as Michael carried Ethan, still groggy, toward the elevators. Anna clung to his side, her hand tight in his. As the elevator doors closed, Anna whispered, "They won't stop, will they?" Michael looked down at her, his voice steady. "No. But neither will I." They drove through the city at night, headlights cutting through the rain-slicked streets. Anna sat pressed against Michael in the back seat, Ethan cradled in his other arm. Outside, neon lights blurred past, the city alive and indifferent. When they reached his penthouse, the guards swept the building before allowing them inside. The apartment stretched wide and gleaming, marble floors and towering glass windows overlooking the skyline. But for the first time, Michael saw it differently, not as a symbol of power, but as a fragile shelter. Anna stepped hesitantly inside, her eyes wide as she took in the chandeliers, the polished furniture, the paintings worth more than the orphanage she had come from. She whispered, almost to herself, "It looks like a castle." Michael managed a faint smile. "Then tonight, it's your castle too." She blinked up at him. "Castles have guards, right?" He nodded. "And so does this one." Later, after Ethan was settled in one of the guest rooms with a nurse watching over him, Michael found Anna standing by the massive window, staring out at the glittering city below. The blanket was still around her shoulders, though it looked small against the vastness of the penthouse. "Are you afraid?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Yes, but not just of them." She turned to face him. "I'm afraid you'll send me back. To the home." Michael's chest tightened. He walked toward her, crouching so they were eye level. "Listen to me. You're not going back there. You're safe here, with me." Her eyes searched his, as though trying to decide whether to believe him. Finally, she whispered, "Promise?" He placed a hand over hers. "Promise." For the first time since he'd met her, she leaned into him willingly, her small head pressing against his chest. Michael held her carefully, his mind burning with determination. They had crossed a line tonight. Whoever had orchestrated the attack had marked not just Ethan, but Anna too. And Michael Grant, a man who had built fortunes on calculated risks, knew this was no longer business. This was war. The penthouse was quiet, but Michael couldn't rest. He stood in the darkened living room, city lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, his mind sharp as broken glass. Ethan slept down the hall under the careful eye of a nurse, and Anna was curled in a guest room bed too large for her small frame, the blanket pulled up to her chin. She had fallen asleep clutching the stuffed bear Ethan had given her, his favorite childhood toy. The sight of it had struck Michael like a blow, the simple trust of children, given so freely. But trust was fragile, and danger pressed closer with every passing hour. He poured himself a glass of water, staring out at the skyline. His phone buzzed, Harris's voice was low, urgent. "Mr. Grant, we've got movement. Surveillance spotted Victor Malone near your building an hour ago. We lost him in traffic, but he's close." Michael's grip tightened on the glass. "So he's not finished?" "No, and you're not safe there," Harris warned. "We're trying to trace his associates, but if Malone is moving, he's got orders. He'll come again." Michael glanced toward the hall where his children because... Yes, that's how Anna felt now were sleeping. His jaw set. "Let him come," he muttered. The call ended, but the unease lingered. Michael's security detail patrolled the penthouse floors. But he knew men like Malone didn't play fair. They slipped in through cracks, through shadows, through the arrogance of thinking you were untouchable. Hours later, the crack came. It was just past midnight when a sound echoed faintly through the penthouse metal scraping against metal. Michael froze. It wasn't the hum of the refrigerator or the shuffle of guards. This was deliberate. Slow. Testing. He moved silently down the hallway, his bare feet making no sound on the polished floors. From the corner, he saw it. The front lock trembling, tools working inside it. The guards were patrolling the lower floors. Whoever was at his door was moving fast and quiet. Michael reached for the nearest object, a heavy glass vase, and gripped it tight. His heart thundered. Not from fear, but from the clarity of knowing this moment had come. He had built empires with sharp instincts, and those instincts screamed now. Protect the children. A whisper of movement behind him. Anna. She stood in the hallway, eyes wide, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a cloak. "Mr. Grant," she whispered. "Someone's here." He crouched, finger to his lips. "Back to your room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." She hesitated, then nodded quickly and darted down the hall, her bare feet barely touching the floor. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. Two men slipped inside, silhouettes against the city glow. Malone was one of them, the scar on his hand unmistakable. He carried a knife this time, its blade glinting. The other held a blunt weapon, heavy in his grip. Michael stepped from the shadows, his voice a low growl. "You picked the wrong house." Malone smirked, teeth flashing. "We came for what's ours." His eyes glittered. "The boy, and maybe the girl." Michael lunged before he finished the sentence. The vase smashed against the first man's shoulder, shattering into shards. The man staggered but didn't fall, swinging his weapon wildly. Michael ducked, the strike glancing across his back with searing pain. Malone moved fast, knife flashing toward Michael's ribs. Michael caught his wrist, the blade grazing his skin, warm blood seeping through his shirt. He twisted, forcing Malone back against the wall. "You think money will save you?" Malone hissed. "No," Michael growled, forcing the man's arm higher. "But my will might." The second man recovered, charging forward, but a deafening shout erupted. Security stormed in, guns drawn, red laser dots pinning the intruders. The men froze, rage burning in their eyes, before dropping their weapons. "On the ground, now!" the guards barked. Malone spat, but he obeyed, hands raised. His scarred palm glistened under the lights, the same mark Anna had described with terrified precision. Michael stood over him, chest heaving, blood dripping down his side. "You'll never touch my son. Or Anna." His voice was steel. "You failed." Police sirens wailed outside, drawing closer. Within minutes, officers flooded the penthouse, handcuffing Malone and his accomplice. Detective Harris arrived shortly after, his face pale when he saw Michael's injury. "Are you all right?" he demanded. "I'm fine," Michael said through clenched teeth, though his ribs screamed otherwise. He glanced toward the hallway. Anna peeked out of the doorway, eyes enormous, clutching the bear to her chest. He walked to her, kneeling despite the pain. "It's over for tonight. They won't hurt you." She trembled, whispering, "They came for me." Michael rested a bloodied hand on her shoulder, "And I stopped them. I told you I keep my promises." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Michael closed his eyes, his jaw tight, one arm wrapping protectively around her small frame. The danger wasn't over. He knew that. Malone was just one piece of a larger game. But tonight, in the face of shadows at his very door, Michael had stood his ground. And Anna had seen it. The penthouse smelled faintly of smoke and adrenaline. Broken glass still littered the floor from the vase Michael had wielded, and streaks of blood, his blood, marked the polished hardwood. The police had left, hauling Malone and his accomplice into the night. But the echo of violence lingered. Michael sat on the edge of the sofa, his shirt torn at the side where the knife had grazed him. A medic knelt in front of him, disinfecting the wound with brisk efficiency. "You were lucky," the medic muttered. "Another inch, and it would have been deep." Michael grunted but didn't respond. His gaze wasn't on the bandage, it was on Anna. She sat cross-legged in the armchair across from him, still clutching Ethan's stuffed bear, her blanket draped over her shoulders like a shield. She hadn't spoken since the men were dragged away. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, wide and unblinking, as if replaying the scene again and again. "Anna," Michael said gently when the medic left. She didn't look up. He rose, ignoring the sting in his side, and crossed the room to crouch before her. "It's over. You're safe." Her lip quivered. "Finally," she whispered. "They said they wanted me." "Why?" Michael swallowed the rush of anger in his chest. "Because you're brave. You stood up to them when no one else would. That makes you dangerous to people who want power. But you're not alone anymore. You have me. You have Ethan." "Oh." Her small fingers dug into the bear's fur. "I thought, if you saw what they tried to do, you wouldn't want me here. I thought you'd send me back." Michael froze at her words. His throat tightened. "Anna, look at me." She lifted her tear-filled eyes. "You're not going back. Not now, not ever. You belong here." Her breath caught. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she whispered, almost like she didn't dare believe it. "Promise?" "I promise," he said firmly, the words carrying the weight of steel. She nodded once, then leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. Michael closed his eyes, his hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. The sound of footsteps interrupted the moment. Detective Harris entered, removing his hat. His eyes swept the scene, the blood, the broken glass. Michael crouched with the child and his face hardened. "Malone won't talk," he said without preamble. "He's loyal to whoever's paying him. But we know this is bigger than him." Michael straightened, keeping one arm around Anna. "Then find out who's behind it." Harris hesitated. "Mr. Grant, I need you to be realistic. If someone powerful ordered this, Malone's arrest won't stop them. It may even provoke them." "Good," Michael said coldly. "Let them come harder. I'll be ready." Anna looked up at him, wide-eyed. Harris studied the pair, then sighed. "The girl's in more danger than ever. Word will spread. She's the reason Malone was caught. If you truly mean to keep her here, you'll need to understand what that means. Your home, your company, your life, it all becomes a battlefield." Michael's voice was iron. "It already is." Harris gave a small nod. "Then I'll station officers outside permanently. But be warned, the higher this goes, the dirtier it gets. These people don't care about innocence. They'll weaponize anything they can." Michael's jaw tightened. "And I'll shield her from it." After Harris left, Michael guided Anna to the guest room. She crawled into the large bed, pulling the blanket to her chin. The stuffed bear was tucked under her arm, its worn fur pressed tight against her cheek. She looked impossibly small against the vastness of silk sheets and carved headboards. "Will they come back?" she whispered. Michael sat on the edge of the bed. "They might try, but they'll have to go through me first." Her eyes glistened. "That's a big fight." He brushed her hair back from her face. "I've fought big fights before, and I've won." She gave a tiny nod, comforted by the certainty in his voice. Within minutes, her eyelids drooped, and sleep finally claimed her. Michael stayed for a long time, watching her breathe, the steady rhythm soothing his battered spirit. When he finally rose and returned to the living room, Catherine was waiting, her face drawn with worry. "You can't keep this up, Michael," she said quietly. "You're trying to be a father, a protector, and a businessman in the middle of a war. Something's going to give. He poured himself a glass of water, his voice low but certain. It won't be them. Then it will be you, she shot back. Michael downed the glass, setting it down with deliberate force. So be it. The city glittered beyond the windows, indifferent to the storm brewing inside. Michael Grant had spent decades building a fortress of wealth and power, but tonight, he understood the truth. His empire wasn't marble floors or stock portfolios. It was the 2 children sleeping under his roof, and for them, he would fight until there was nothing left to give. The dawn broke with a haze of gold spilling across the skyline, but Michael didn't feel its warmth. He had been awake all night, sitting in the study with a glass of untouched whiskey on the desk. Reports from his private investigators littered the table, financial trails, whispers of names, rival corporations. Each thread pointed to a deeper network, yet none gave him the full picture. When the door creaked open, he expected one of his security men. Instead, it was Anna. She padded inside barefoot, dragging her blanket behind her like a cape. Her curls were tangled, her eyes heavy with sleep. But she walked with quiet purpose. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. Michael leaned back, exhaustion carved into his features. "Neither did you, it seems." She climbed into the chair opposite his desk, folding her legs under her. "I couldn't. I kept dreaming they came back." Michael's chest tightened. "They won't. Not here." She studied him, her small brow furrowed. "But you're scared too." The honesty of the child's words pierced through his armor. He had spent years projecting strength, never allowing weakness to show, even to himself. Yet here was a 6-year-old girl who saw straight through him. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I'm scared, but being scared doesn't mean we stop fighting." Anna leaned forward, whispering, "Do you think they hate me?" Michael's fists clenched. "No. They fear you. Because you told the truth. And truth scares people who live in the dark." Before Anna could reply, Catherine appeared at the doorway. "Michael, you need to see this." She set a tablet on the desk, the screen already playing a morning news broadcast. A commentator's voice filled the study. Sources confirm the billionaire's son was the target of an organized attack. But questions remain about the mysterious girl who was found with him. Who is she? Where did she come from? And why is Michael Grant so determined to keep her under his roof? Photos of Anna flashed across the screen, blurry shots from the hospital, her small hand clinging to Michael's sleeve. The commentators dissected her presence like vultures, speculating whether she was a runaway, a pawn, or worse. Anna shrank into her blanket, her face pale. "They're talking about me." Michael muted the screen instantly. He crouched beside her chair, his voice low but fierce. "Let them talk. They don't know you. They don't know what you did. But I do. And Ethan does. That's what matters." Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought to keep them back. "What if they never believe me?" Michael reached for her hand, strong and steady. "Then I'll believe you enough for all of them." Later that morning, Detective Harris arrived with updates. He looked more worn than ever, his tie askew, his eyes bloodshot. "Malone won't crack," he admitted. "But we've traced a financial link between his crew and an offshore account tied to one of your competitors. This wasn't random, Mr. Grant. Someone in your world pulled the strings." Michael's voice turned to stone. "Names." Harris hesitated. "We're still confirming. But you need to understand, if it is who we think it is, they won't stop until they've made their point. And dragging this girl into your life? It paints a target on her back as well as your son's." Anna sat on the couch, silent but listening, her eyes darting between the men. Michael's hand tightened into a fist. "Then let them aim," he said coldly. "Because now they're aiming at me." After Harris left, Michael retreated to Ethan's room. His son was awake, drawing on a tablet with crayons the nurse had brought. He looked up as Michael entered, his eyes lighting. "Dad." "Bye, Prex." Michael smiled faintly, sitting beside him. "How are you feeling?" "Better." Ethan held up his drawing proudly. It was messy but clear, 3 stick figures holding hands under a sundae. One was tall, one was small, and one was somewhere in between. "That's you. That's me." And that's Anna. Michael's throat tightened. It's perfect. Ethan beamed, then lowered his voice conspiratorially. Dad, can Anna stay with us? Always? Michael looked at his son, then at the drawing. In the quiet of that hospital room, surrounded by crayon lines and childish hope, he realized he had already made the decision. Yes, he said firmly. She stays. When he returned to the study later, Anna was sitting by the window again, her blanket still wrapped tight. He sat beside her, placing Ethan's drawing in her lap. She traced the lines with her finger, her eyes wide. He drew me, she whispered. Michael nodded. Because you're part of this family now. Her lips parted in surprise, her breath catching. Slowly, a smile bloomed across her face, not fleeting, not uncertain, but radiant, full of a light he hadn't seen before. Michael leaned back, watching her. For the first time in days, he felt something stir inside him beyond anger or fear. It was resolve, sharper than ever, but also something else, something fragile yet powerful. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for them. For Ethan, for Anna, for the family fate had thrown together in fire and danger. And he knew, with bone-deep certainty, that no enemy on earth would take that from him. The penthouse was restless with movement that evening. Security men walked the halls, radios buzzing faintly. Their presence constant and heavy. Michael had doubled the detail after the attack, but it didn't ease the tension in his chest. He sat at the head of the long dining table, untouched plates of food spread before him, steak, roasted potatoes, and a bottle of wine uncorked. Across the table, Anna sat with a plate of macaroni, her small fork moving hesitantly. She watched him in silence for a while before whispering, "You're not eating." Michael forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I've got too much on my mind." "You're thinking about them," she said simply. "The men who tried to take Ethan." His brows lifted slightly. She was sharper than most adults he'd dealt with. "Yes." "And the men who sent them." Anna put her fork down. "Then find them before they find us again." Michael stared at her, startled by the directness. The words were chilling, not because they were wrong, but because they came from a 6-year-old who had seen too much. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "That's exactly what I intend to do." Later that night, when Ethan was asleep and Anna had drifted off clutching her blanket, Michael gathered with Catherine and his head of security in the study. Harris had left earlier with promises of updates, but Michael didn't trust the pace of official channels. He wanted answers now. The head of security, a thick-set man named Alvarez, placed a dossier on the desk. "We pulled surveillance from 2 different sources. Malone's crew was spotted near the East River docks last week. Meeting with a man we believe is tied to Stonewell Industries." Michael's eyes narrowed. Stonewell was a rival corporation he had undercut in a recent acquisition, a billion-dollar deal that had made headlines. Its CEO, Richard Stonewell, was as ruthless as they came. A man who hated to lose. "Stonewell," Michael muttered. "Of course," Catherine frowned. "But would he go this far? Kidnapping your son?" Michael's voice hardened. "For men like Stonewell, children are just leverage." Alvarez continued. "We also discovered Malone received multiple wire transfers from an offshore account traced to a shell company. The same shell company Stonewell used in a lawsuit 5 years ago. The pieces fit too neatly to be coincidence." Michael rose from his chair, pacing the length of the study. Rage simmered beneath his skin, not the blinding fury of a father whose child had been harmed, but a cold, calculated anger. This was business to Stonewell, a game of power. But Michael knew better than anyone. Every game had an end. He stopped at the window, the city lights stretching endless below. "If Stonewell thinks he can touch my family, he's mistaken. He wanted a war, he'll have one." Catherine stepped forward cautiously. "Michael, be careful. If you push too hard, you risk everything, the company, your reputation." Michael turned, his voice sharp as steel. "I've already risked everything. My son nearly died. Anna lives in fear every second. This isn't about reputation anymore. It's about survival." The room fell silent. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of the penthouse, pausing by the door of Ethan's room. His boy was curled under the covers, breathing softly. In the next room, Anna slept with the stuffed bear tucked beneath her chin, her blanket twisted in her small fists. Michael stood there, watching her for a long moment. She stirred slightly, whispering in her sleep. He leaned closer, catching the faint words, "Don't take me back." The plea pierced him. He closed the door softly, his resolve hardening. By morning, his plan was clear. If Stonewell had orchestrated this, then Michael wouldn't wait for the law to catch up. He would turn the game on its head. He met Harris later that day at a quiet cafe near the precinct. The detective leaned in, voice low. "You're right about Stonewell, but proving it is another matter. He's insulated. Layers of shell companies, men like Malone taking the fall. If you go after him recklessly, you'll end up in a war you might not win." Michael's eyes were cold, determined. "Then I'll change the rules." Harris studied him, then shook his head. "Just don't lose sight of what matters." But Michael already knew what mattered. Ethan's laugh. Anna's wide, cautious eyes. The fragile thread of family he'd nearly lost once and would not lose again. That night, back at the penthouse, Michael gathered Anna and Ethan in the living room. Ethan, pale but recovering, leaned against his father. Anna sat close by, her blanket draped like armor. Michael looked at them both, his voice steady. "There are people who think they can scare us. People who believe they can break us apart. But they're wrong. We're stronger together. And I won't let them hurt either of you again." Ethan nodded sleepily. Anna whispered, "Promise?" Michael wrapped his arms around both children, pulling them close. "Promise." In the glittering city beyond, Richard Stonewell sat in his own tower, believing he had forced Michael into a corner. But Michael Grant knew better. He wasn't cornered. He was hunting. And soon, Stonewell would learn what it meant to provoke a father with nothing left to lose. The storm outside the penthouse matched the storm inside Michael's chest. Rain lashed against the glass walls, streaks of lightning flashing over the city. Ethan and Anna were asleep in their rooms, unaware of the war brewing beyond their dreams. Michael stood in the study with Alvarez, Catherine, and a map of the city spread across the desk. Alvarez tapped the East River docks with a thick finger. Stonewell's men used this warehouse as a front. No official connection, but Malone's crew was spotted there twice in the past month. Michael's jaw tightened. And Stonewell himself? Too smart to show his face? But the money trail runs through the shell companies tied to him. "We're still digging." Catherine spoke up, her voice edged with caution. "Michael, this is dangerous ground. If you strike now, without proof, you could bring his lawyers down on you and worse, make yourself look like the aggressor." Michael's gaze hardened. "He put a knife at my door. He tried to take my son. I don't need proof to know what I felt when I looked into Malone's eyes. He was working for someone with power. That someone is Stonewell." Alvarez exchanged a look with Catherine but said nothing. He'd worked with Michael long enough to recognize that tone, the same one that had crushed rivals in boardrooms and left them bleeding in the markets. A soft sound pulled Michael's attention. Anna stood at the study doorway, rubbing her eyes, her blanket trailing behind her. She looked impossibly small against the heavy shadows of the room. "You're still awake," Michael said gently, his voice softening. She nodded. "I heard you talking. About bad men." Michael sighed, moving toward her. He crouched, ignoring the pull in his injured side. "Yes, Anna. We're talking about keeping you and Ethan safe." Her lip trembled. "But what if they come again?" He rested a hand on her small shoulder. "Then they'll find out what happens when they cross this family." "Ugh." She blinked up at him. "Family?" Michael froze, the word hanging in the air heavier than he expected. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, family." Anna leaned against him briefly, then whispered, "Don't let them send me back. Please." His chest ached at the plea. "You're not going back. You stay with us. That's final." Later that night, Michael found himself sitting in Ethan's room. His son stirred in his sleep. Murmuring dreams, the faintest smile on his lips. On the nightstand was the crayon drawing from the hospital, 3 figures holding hands under a bright Sunday. Michael touched the edge of the paper, his throat tightening. This is what I'm fighting for, he thought. Not companies. Not empires. Them. The next day, Harris called with an update. Stonewall's lawyers are already circling. They're trying to frame this as a smear campaign, say you invented the story to distract from business scandals. He's trying to turn the public against you. Michael almost laughed at the audacity. He wants a war of perception? Fine. I'll give him one. But I'll also give him something he can't spin evidence. Harris's voice was grim. Be careful. If you push too far, they'll retaliate. And next time, they won't use bait. They'll go for blood. That evening, Michael sat Anna and Ethan at the dinner table. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed and glimmering under streetlights. Ethan poked at his mashed potatoes while Anna quietly sipped from a glass of milk. Michael folded his hands, studying them. There may be more danger ahead, but I want you both to hear this. Nothing matters more to me than keeping you safe. You're my world now. Both of you. Ethan's eyes lit up. Even Anna? Michael smiled faintly. Especially Anna. Anna froze, her fork suspended in midair. Slowly, her lips curved into a small, incredulous smile. It was shy, but real. Ethan reached over and slipped his tiny hand into hers. See? I told you you're part of us. Michael's chest swelled with a mix of pride and pain. Pride in their resilience, pain in knowing the danger wasn't over. Not yet. After dinner, when the children were asleep, Michael returned to the study. Alvarez handed him a flash drive. Surveillance footage. It ties Stonewall's man to the payment drop. Enough to rattle him. Michael took it, staring at the small device in his palm. This was leverage. Not enough to end the war, but enough to move the battlefield. He slipped it into his pocket. His decision already made. He turned to Alvarez. Get the car ready. Tomorrow, I pay Richard Stonewall a visit. The morning broke clear and sharp, a deceptive peace after days of storm. Michael dressed in a dark suit, his movements steady, controlled, though his mind burned with purpose. In his breast pocket, the flash drive lay like a weapon. Alvarez was waiting in the hallway, armed and alert, while Catherine hovered with quiet concern. Are you sure about this? She asked, her tone hushed. Confronting Stonewall directly, this could spiral out of control. Michael buttoned his jacket. It's already out of control. He came for my son. For Anna. I won't wait for another strike. Alvarez gave a short nod. Cars ready. Security's doubled. We'll have men posted around the building during the meeting. Before leaving, Michael paused at the guest room. Anna sat cross-legged on the bed, hugging the stuffed bear tightly. Her wide eyes fixed on him as if she knew he was about to walk into danger. Where are you going? She whispered. To talk to someone who needs to hear me, he said. Her lip trembled. What if they hurt you? Michael stepped inside, crouching to her level. He placed a steady hand on her small shoulder. They won't. And I'll come back. I promise. She nodded reluctantly, then whispered. Be careful. He managed a faint smile. Always. The drive across the city was tense, the SUV gliding through morning traffic while 2 other vehicles flanked it. Michael sat in silence, staring out the tinted window. His reflection hardened by resolve. Stonewall's skyscraper loomed ahead, sleek and menacing, its mirrored glass catching the sunlight like a blade. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble floors and cold efficiency. Security eyed them as they passed, but Alvarez's presence and Michael's name ensured quick access. They rode the elevator in silence, the ascent stretching into an eternity. At last, the doors opened onto the top floor. Stonewall's office was as imposing as its owner, walls of glass overlooking the city, shelves lined with awards, and a desk that seemed more like a throne than furniture. Behind it sat Richard Stonewall, tall, silver-haired, his smile sharp as a knife. Michael, Stonewall drawled, rising with outstretched hands. What a surprise. I didn't expect the king of Grant Enterprises to visit so soon after your troubles. His eyes glittered with mock sympathy. How's the boy? Michael's jaw tightened. He didn't take the offered hand. Alive. Thanks to someone braver than you'll ever be. Stonewall chuckled, lowering himself into his chair. Direct, as always. But let's not dance around it, shall we? You think I had something to do with your little incident? Michael leaned forward, placing the flash drive on the desk with deliberate care. I don't think, Richard. I know. Payments from your shell company. Your men at the docks with Malone. You wanted leverage. You chose my son. For the first time, Stonewall's smile faltered. He glanced at the flash drive, then back at Michael. You've always been dramatic. Business is ruthless. You know that better than anyone. But accusing me of child endangerment, that's a dangerous claim without proof. Michael's eyes burned with fury. That drive is proof. Enough to ruin you in the boardroom, in the courtroom, and in the public eye. One word from me, and your empire collapses. Stonewall's mask cracked. His voice sharpened. You won't. Because if you do, the people behind me, the ones who funded this, will come for you harder than ever. And they won't stop at your children. They'll gut your company, bleed you dry, until there's nothing left but ashes. The silence was heavy, the air electric with tension. Michael leaned closer, his voice low and lethal. Let them come. I've built an empire from nothing. And I'll rebuild it again if I have to. But I will not rebuild a son. Or a daughter. Stonewall froze. Daughter? Michael straightened, his gaze unwavering. Anna. She's part of my family now, and if you or anyone you work with comes near her again, you'll pray the law gets to you before I do. For the first time in years, Richard Stonewall looked unsettled. His smirk slipped, his hands tightening on the armrests of his chair. He opened his mouth, but Michael had already turned, Alvarez at his side. As they exited the office, Catherine whispered, You just declared open war. Michael's eyes were hard. No, Stonewall declared it when he touched my son. I just answered. Back at the penthouse, Anna was waiting by the window, her blanket trailing behind her. When Michael entered, she rushed forward, her small arms wrapping around his waist. You came back. Michael bent down, hugging her tightly. I told you I would. She pulled back, her eyes searching his face. Did you win? Michael hesitated. In truth, this was only the beginning. But he cupped her face gently and said, Not yet. But I will. She nodded as if that was enough, her trust unshaken. Later that night, as the city pulsed beyond the glass, Michael stood in the darkened study, staring at the flash drive. He had crossed the line. The hunter had stepped into the open, and the enemy was no longer faceless. The storm was coming, and this time, there would be no hiding from it. The city was restless that night, as if it knew what was coming. Michael stood in the penthouse study, the skyline glittering behind him, his hands braced on the desk. The flash drive still sat there, the weight of it heavier than steel. One press of a button, and Stonewall's empire would burn. But Harris's warning echoed in his mind. Stonewall wasn't alone. Bringing him down meant waking enemies who operated in shadows far darker than corporate greed. Alvarez entered quietly, earpiece in place. Security's tight. Guards on every floor. No one gets near without us knowing. Michael nodded. Good. Tonight. No mistakes. From down the hall. Laughter drifted faintly. Ethan was awake, showing Anna his crayon sketches. Both children sprawled across the living room floor. For a moment, Michael closed his eyes, holding onto the sound. It was fragile, a reminder of what was truly at stake. Catherine slipped in, her voice urgent. Michael, Stonewall's not waiting. He just filed a lawsuit against you, defamation, slander, you name it. It's all over the news. He's painting you as unstable, reckless, even unfit as a parent. Michael's fists tightened. Let him try. He's daring you to push back, she pressed. And when you do, he'll drag Anna into the spotlight. He'll use her past, twisted into something ugly. Michael turned sharply, his voice hard as iron. Then I'll stand taller. They won't touch her. Not while I breathe. Before Catherine could respond, Alvarez's radio crackled. Movement on the west side. 2 vans. Approaching fast. Ma. Michael's blood ran cold. They're coming. Within minutes, alarms blared softly through the penthouse. Security scrambled, locking down entrances. Michael rushed to the living room, where Ethan and Anna looked up in alarm. He crouched quickly, cupping Ethan's face. Stay with Nurse Helen. Don't leave this room. He turned to Anna. Her wide eyes filled with fear. Do you remember what I told you? She nodded shakily. Hide. Don't open the door unless it's you. Do. Good girl, he whispered, brushing her curls back. I'll come back for you. Always. He rose just as the first explosion rocked the building. Smoke and glass showered the main hall. Armed men poured in Stonewall's mercenaries, their faces masked, weapons gleaming. Michael didn't hesitate. He met them head-on, Alvarez and the guards flanking him. The penthouse erupted in chaos, gunfire echoing, shouts, the crash of furniture splintering. Michael grabbed a fallen weapon, adrenaline burning through the pain in his ribs. One mercenary lunged for the hallway leading to the children's rooms. Michael intercepted him, fury fueling his strength. He slammed the man into the wall, the impact rattling the glass. Not them, he growled, driving him to the ground. Across the room, Alvarez shouted orders, firing precise shots that dropped attackers one by one. But more poured in. It was relentless. Michael fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Every strike, every shot, was for Ethan's laughter, for Anna's fragile trust, for the promise he refused to break. Blood slicked his hands, his breath ragged, but he refused to fall. Then, through the smoke, a figure emerged, Richard Stonewall himself. He strode into the penthouse with chilling calm, flanked by 2 bodyguards. His eyes swept the carnage with disdain before settling on Michael. You should have left well enough alone. Stonewall sneered. Business is business. You of all people should understand that. Michael's chest heaved, his grip tight on the weapon. Business ends when you come for my children. Stonewall smirked. You can't protect them forever. Men like me, we always win. Michael raised the flash drive between 2 bloodied fingers. Not this time. With a swift motion, he hurled it across the room toward Catherine, who caught it and bolted for the secure elevator. Stonewall's smirk cracked. He barked an order, his guards charging. Michael met them with everything left in him. Alvarez took one down, but another slammed Michael against the wall. Fists flying. Michael fought back, teeth gritted, his vision blurring from blood and sweat. At the height of chaos, the sound of sirens wailed outside. Police stormed the building, led by Harris. Officers flooded the penthouse, overpowering the mercenaries. Stonewall's smug expression faltered as handcuffs snapped around his wrists. This isn't over, Stonewall spat as Harris dragged him forward. You think you've won? You have no idea who you're up against. Michael wiped blood from his mouth, his voice steady. Maybe not. But I know this, you'll never touch my family again. As Stonewall was led away, Michael stumbled toward the hallway. He burst into the children's room, his chest aching. Ethan clung to Nurse Helen, eyes wide with terror. Anna sat curled in the corner, clutching the stuffed bear so tightly her knuckles were white. When she saw him, she bolted into his arms. You came back, she cried. Michael dropped to his knees, holding both children against him, his voice breaking. Always. I promised, didn't I? The penthouse was wrecked, his body battered, the war far from over. But in that moment, with Ethan's arms around his neck and Anna's small frame pressed against his chest, Michael knew one truth. He hadn't fought in vain. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a billionaire or a businessman. He was a father, a protector, a man who had drawn a line in the sand and refused to let it be crossed. And as he held his children close, he knew this was only the beginning of a new life, a life built not on wealth, but on promises kept, and on a family forged in fire. In the end, Michael Grant learned a truth that no wealth or empire could buy. Family is not measured by blood, but by the courage to protect one another when the world turns cruel. His billions could not shield Ethan from danger, nor silence the whispers against Anna, but his promise did his choice to stand, to fight, and to love without hesitation. The lesson is simple yet timeless. Justice is not always delivered by courts or contracts, but by the quiet strength of keeping a promise, of standing guard over the innocent, and of refusing to let fear decide who belongs in our hearts.